for today.
Okay, our program today is going to be include two of our long-term members of the club here today. I don't know if everybody knows that we have some real knowledgeable people in our club. Today our demonstration is going to be Glenn Jensen and John Jackson, and they're going to be talking about deciduous trees. Now both Glenn and John have been involved in bonsai since the 70s. They've both been trained by some really big people in bonsai in the area. Harry Harao, John Naka, just to name a few. Right now both of them are curators. One, Glenn is the curator at the Japanese Friendship Garden, and John is the curator at the Wild Animal Park. Safari Park, I'm sorry. Old school. Okay, so we just save time. If you guys could come on up. Get started. Okay.
Deciduous trees that are starting, is this on? Yes, everybody can hear me? Okay. Deciduous trees, the trees that are just starting to sprout out, some more so than others. They're the really fast growers during the growing season and the ones that sleep during the winter. You can see that these are all in different stages. The one on the end is obviously not a deciduous tree, but that tree is, it can be leaf pruned, as you can any other deciduous tree. And you can see they're all in different stages of their development of the leaves coming out in the spring. So I'll let Glenn talk a little bit about his.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we go from the very beginning to shovel trees. And most of them start from cuttings. I just cut some off from my trees at home. This is pomegranate. This is a Chinese elm. This is a variety of Chinese elm, Catlin elm, that I've had for a long time, and it's developing. The ramification is what we talk about, having a lot of little branchlets form to really make it look full. This is a silverberry, as John said. It's not deciduous, but I wanted to show you how you can pull branches down with kite string rather than wiring them. Sometimes wiring, if you're not careful, will cut into a deciduous tree and leave marks. This is, I go from cutting pomegranate to wiring it into some shape, and then I will put this in the ground and grow it for a few years. I'll forget it, and then go back and dig it up and restyle again. But at least it begins with a few curves, and not monotonous, but a few curves. John?
Yeah, a little bit of history about this tree. This is a hackberry that I got from John Voss probably somewhere around 37 years ago. So I've been around a long time. But deciduous trees are, to get this ramification like you see on this tree, takes a long time. It does not happen very quickly. And so the more you prune it during the growing season, and the more meticulous you are about keeping your inner nodes short, and when you get a tree that's developed at this stage, and the tree is really healthy, you can leaf prune these trees. That means after the leaves come out and they're fully developed, then and they're hardened off, they say hardened off, that means they're mature leaves. Then you can take all those leaves off. You can do this one time a year on deciduous trees. That's if they're very healthy. And if they're in the stage where you've got your branch lengths and your height and all that stuff dealt with, then you leaf prune, and that gives you a lot more ramification of your tree. And that's what you want. You want all this twigginess in here so that the tree looks more full and looks good when it doesn't have any leaves on it. We have one show that we go to every year, which is the Winter Silhouette Show, and most of the trees in that show look like this. There with no leaves on. And it takes a long time to do this. It just doesn't happen overnight. So the more you prune them, and the more you keep those inner nodes short, the better the tree will look. Another one that this is just something I threw together for, this is for sale. It'll be for sale at the show. It's just, I used to have an elm, and it always produced a lot of seeds. And I just threw a bunch of seeds in this pot last year, and this is what I ended up with. I don't know how many trees are in here. They're all wired, because they just grow all crazy when you do it. So I wanted them straight, so I just wired them all, and now they're leafing out, and it'll be a nice little forest.
Thanks, John. Yeah, how many went to the Winter Silhouettes? Boy, that's a great show, isn't it? Any comments? It's just, yeah, there are no leaves, no flowers, but they show the ramification. I think the deciduous trees are at their best in the winter. At the Japanese Friendship Garden, sometimes people will stop by and go, "Why are you showing that dead tree?" So we explained, we live in San Diego, and we don't really get cold, and so they don't go dormant that much, but some of them do. And we work on trying to get the twigginess, like what John was saying there. The silverberry, sometimes you can leaf cut. You can the largest leaves you can cut in half, and then you'll encourage new growth inside. And you can do that with other trees too, like Japanese maples. The elms do really well with defoliating in the summer. So we go through two seasons. It's gone through the winter where it dropped its leaves, and then the end of June, beginning of July, I will pull all the old, all the new leaves off, and it'll twig out again. It's an incredibly boring job to pull leaves, but it works. Cuttings, pomegranates do really well from big pieces, even bigger than this. Then you can grow them in the ground, and they'll get really nice, gnarly trunks. A neighbor of mine had a twisted pomegranate in her front yard, probably this big, really big, but it had suckers, so I stopped and asked if I could take some cuttings last fall, and they grew really well. So a good place to start is with pomegranates from cuttings. And then this is the elm.
This tree is not mine. This is Charlie Moss. He's on a little vacation thing, and he wanted me to bring it in because he was going to be here, but then he's not here. So he wanted me to cut on this a little bit. So I'm going to prune it up just a little bit, just to show you some of the things that you can do with these trees. This tree is actually quite tall. And so if you look at proportions are very, very important in all trees, not necessarily deciduous trees, but all trees. So you see the trunk goes up, and then from here, you got all this up here that's really all the same size. So you really want to shorten this down. And I already talked to Charlie about this, and he knows I'm going to cut this off. So so we're going to... So I'm just going to cut it off. And actually, once this buds back and everything, then we'll cut it off again, because we really want the top of the tree, right about this point here.
What kind of tree is it, John?
I think it's a liquid amber.
Okay.
I believe it's a liquid amber. Not 100% certain. I don't know if I ever asked Charlie that, but the bark looks like liquid amber or something like that. So these other branches in here, they're really long and gangly, so these need to be cut back also, because if you don't, these are just going to get longer and you're getting all these buds and stuff out here, but you're not going to have anything on the inside. And as you can see on this tree, you want stuff on the inside. You don't want it to be all this nakedness and just have the leaves out on the end. So,
John, when you cut those, you cut them at a slant?
I do cut it. This is what I always tell people. If you're cutting something on the top of the tree, you hold your scissors like this. Scissors, or these are kind of half-round concave cutters. You hold your scissors like this. If you're cutting roots, you cut down. You cut roots, scissors pointing down. Cut the top, cut scissors pointing up. Always. Sun heals the cuts, and you want the growth to come from the underneath of the branch. You always cut on the underside so that you've got a branch coming off the bottom, not off the top. So you always cut so that you've got an underneath piece coming. And this holds true with all trees, whether it be deciduous, evergreen, whatever. We always cut so that the part you leave comes off the bottom of the branch, not off the top of the branch. And you try and cut back to a bud also. This really doesn't have any buds on it, so I left some buds. That's why I left this. Otherwise, I would cut this back even shorter because it's way too long. But you want to cut back to buds. And when you cut trees, you kind of want to cut. I mean, this is pretty straight right here, which is not really that desirable to have a really straight branch. Really, unless you have a formal upright tree, you might have straight branches. But otherwise, you want your branches to be really crooked. So you usually diagonal prune. In other words, you want to prune them so that you have a cut, and then it goes this way, and then it goes this way, and then it goes this way. So you get a really crooked branch. And the same with all your secondary, tertiary branches and everything else. You always want to have that process going on. See, this is growing straight up right here, but there's a bud right here that's coming out off the bottom. And this is not really, this is really too long. This is the main branch comes this way. I don't know what Charlie, I think the front of his tree is here. And the main part of the branch does go this way. It would be better if it came over this way. That might have to be changed, maybe shorten it even more, and get this to be the branch here, and this just be the tertiary branches over on the side here, because this is his second branch here.
John,
Yes.
is this the right time to be
Yes.
pruning?
Yeah, now's a good time, because now this tree is starting, it'll be moving, the buds are starting to swell, so now's a good time, because the sap is starting to flow, so that means everything's moving, the tree's gonna start growing again. You wouldn't wanna do this in the beginning of the winter time, because it's gonna be sitting there dormant the whole winter time. You can, but most of the time it's better off just to wait until early spring, just before the leaves come out, to start doing anything on this, to do that. I think that's pretty much all I'm going to take off of this at this time. But and then I will seal these cuts. And also there's one other thing I was going to show. There's a branch on the front of the tree right here that I was going to show that we think it's all the way dead. I don't know. I never checked it.
It looks dead, so he's going to try to take it all the way back down to live wood and seal it probably.
Usually with gin.
Yeah, you don't really want gin on deciduous trees. It's just not natural. It is natural on pines and junipers, not on deciduous. And it looks like it's even got a little bit of rot in it from when that stub was left there, so he's carving that out. Nice and smooth across, and then it'll be sealed. You know, Charlie's not here. I would consider cutting it off right here. Solve that.
Make sure you film that.
I was going to show something else, but this was entirely dead. Because if you've got a live branch, if you have a live branch, this is usually done with branches that are pretty big, and you don't want to leave a big scar right there. So what you do is you cut the collar. The collar is where the branch meets the trunk, and you take all the bark off of that, and then you let that piece dry. And as it dries, it shrinks, and as it shrinks, the collar grows around it. And then once that shrinkage, the piece that you left on there dies and dries out, once that dries out completely and it's shrunk to its maximum, the collar usually shrinks and grows as that shrinks. And then you can take and cut that off, and that helps accelerate the healing process. So that's done, I think it's done a lot on, I've heard it done on pines a lot because they're so slow in healing over, but you can also do it on almost any tree. Most deciduous trees you don't need to do it on, but I was going to show that on this, but this was completely dead. I mean, so far I've just barely got down to live cambium, not even all the way around, so I'm going to cut in a little bit more. And also when you make a scar on a tree, you want to have a cut that's like this, as opposed to being round. When I was taught, and Glenn was taught, we were all taught to use a knob cutter or something and make a round cut. But that cut really doesn't heal that well. I mean, it heals, but it kind of leaves a collar or a bigger callus. When you cut like this, the wound heals a lot more evenly, and there's a lot less apt to be seen. After many years, it won't be near as noticeable as a cut that leaves a circle like this. And surgeons do the same thing on people when they surgery. They don't make a round cut on a hole, they'll make it oblique, oval, like that. And let Glenn talk while I finish this.
Yeah, what I noticed here too on this tree is there's also a dead area here. Deciduous trees really need to be sealed when you cut a branch off, cut a big branch off. And then doing like what John's doing, a surgical cut, really smooth. A sharp knife after this or whatever, but it's smooth, it's not rough. We used to just go chop them off, but it needs to be nice and smooth and get some of that dead stuff out of there. Yes?
Engineering based on that, or we just leave it there?
Say again?
You ever use cut paste or leave it alone?
You know, I don't like the color of cut paste. I use it on pine trees, but on deciduous trees, I just usually use the ointment, I don't know what they're called now, any of the sealing pastes. We used to use woodworker's glue. Right? There's some here. Yeah. Oh, here, John's got some. This is the sealing paste that he would use on this. It's an ointment type, it's not putty. Putty works pretty well on black pines. What I wanted to tell you about this, for ramification, once again, they're budding now, the tips are green. I'm gonna let this grow for a month or two, and it's gonna, and then I'm gonna cut it back, get new growth, that'll give more ramification, and then leaf cut in the summer and even more. This was repotted last year, so I will leave it in this soil for another year or two. When we cut, I was talking to, I think it was Nancy? Yeah, Nancy over there, about directional pruning on deciduous trees. If there are two leaves coming out of the same spot, you can cut one off and go in the other direction. And we kind of zigzag them. If they're coming at lower levels, then you choose one and you can go in that direction. So if I can show you that on this elm tree. So if we're gonna prune this, and I want the growth to go this way, then we're gonna go off like that, and the growth is going to go that way. Then the next time I do that, I'm going to go the opposite direction. And then I'll go like this. And then, so we'll get the leaves going back and forth like that. We call it directional pruning. Chinese call it clip and grow, impinging. Chinese basically do clip and grow. We use wire and pulling things down like that. This silverberry, which is not deciduous, but I treat it like it, I'm going to let these grow out like this because we're always looking for a healthy tree, number one. We can cut them all the way back, but if they die, it doesn't do us any good. So I will let these grow, and then midsummer, then I will cut this back for shape again. And any really, really big leaves, I'll cut them in half, like this one. And you can do that on just about any deciduous tree, as well as these. Wiring for shape, you don't want anything really monotonous. First curve goes back, then to the side, and nothing really predictably boring, going off in different directions. And then I'll take the wire off. This has been on for about a year. And then I'll put this in the ground and let it just go wild, grow it. And then I will have a trunk that's got some curves in it, and I can make some choices. The curves will gradually, this is a small trunk. When it gets bigger, they're going to get less and less and less. So there'll be some real subtle curves on a big tree like this.
Hey, Glenn,
Yes.
I was wondering, will you defoliate that in July? Will the leaves that come out from that, will they be smaller?
Yes, yeah, that's one of the benefits too of defoliation is leaves generally come out smaller. Some trees are so strong, like liquid amber that I've worked with. I've defoliated 3 times in a year. They leaf out really strongly, and right away in the spring I would defoliate in, say, April, defoliate again in late June, and defoliate again towards the end of the summer. And they seem to do okay. You have to be careful though, because some trees don't like it. It weakens them. So you have to know your trees a little bit. This guy is strong over here. So Can we show him your cut there, John?
I just had it turned around.
See how he's really made that nice and smooth, straight cut, and then he's going to seal it.
Callus does not like to grow over rough wood. Likes a really smooth surface. So, I mean, I've had trees. I have a tree at home. It's actually another one of these. It's about twice that size, but it was a volunteer. It was bird dropping. Anyhow, yeah, it was growing in the ground, and it had some really big scars on it, but they had dried out and had split inside, so I actually took some epoxy and put it in there and smoothed it over. It was that stick type that's kind of makes it like a putty, and I was able to smooth that really smooth, and the calluses really healed over that very nicely. So I'm going to seal this up.
Can you turn this on, please?
Yeah. You see it okay? Yeah.
Glenn,
Yes.
a question about how to deal with the first flush of growth, and also the same question for the hackberry, John. Do you let the first flush of growth harden off before you prune it back to shape?
I do, yeah.
Okay. And I heard Jason Chan say on a demonstration, he was talking about an elm in particular, that if you want to promote ramification, you need to let the first flush grow long enough to where you're cutting back on a lignified part of the branch rather than cutting on a soft green. I'm wondering if you found that to be.
I hadn't really thought about that. I was thinking more about the health of the tree, of letting it grow out and then cutting it back. But that makes sense, the lignification, in other words, the hardness of the branch versus a brand new soft branch. Yeah, I think that would be tough on brand new growth. So I would agree with that, yes. But that's just, that'll be like, what, a couple of months from now, I'll cut it back to this shape. Otherwise, I'm going to let this grow wild.
Glenn,
Yes?
my elms never lose their leaves. Should I take them off?
Well, you'll get more ramification by removing them. But once again, consider the time of year. I mean,
But so now, I have new leaves coming off, but the old leaves are still there.
yeah, I'd take the old leaves off. I talked to John a couple months ago, and he said all of his deciduous trees he defoliated because it's winter. They want to go to sleep.
Yeah, I always take all the leaves off. I do it for two reasons. Number one is they're going to fall off eventually anyhow. Even if they don't fall off during the wintertime, during the growing season, they're going to constantly falling off. You're going to have leaves falling off all year long because deciduous leaves only last a year. And so consequently, you either take them all off at once and have them all fall off at one time, or you have them fall off all during the year. And where my bonsai are, the ground is all gravel. And so I don't like to have all those leaves all in my gravel. So I just, once the leaves start to turn and I'm sure that it's going into dormancy, I just take them all off. I put a tarp underneath, take them all off, and then they're all done. It's all clean and neat. I don't have all the mess all over the ground. So that's the way I do it. And as far as pruning, it depends on, like on this tree, this one's got a pretty good ramification on it. I see some things that I noticed I've got to cut out of this, but when I was looking at it the other day. But a lot of times when this starts to leaf out, as soon as if a leaf is forming and that branch is long enough, and all I want to do is for it to back bud, I'll go in there and you just barely can see the second leaf come out, and I'll cut it off so that it splits right there and puts out two leaves. Because when you cut these back, wherever you cut one leaf off, you cut it back to one, two leaves form, or two branches form. And that's how you get really good ramification, is by doing that. If you let it get real long, sometimes, here again, if you're trying to make the branch longer, you want the branch longer, then you have to let it grow. But once it reaches this stage, I don't care if any of these branches get long. It'd be nice if the lower branch was a little bit longer, this one and this one, but this tree has never really shown a penchant to really grow out like that. So it's more of a kind of a straight or upright tree, but I just really pinch it back quickly. I mean, sometimes just, you can see the bud, and I just pinch that little bud out as soon as it starts, the second leaf starts to come out. That way it splits and you get all this ramification on your branches.
Hey, John.
Yes.
There's one branch there inside the band, the long one.
This one?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, can you remove that and graft branches in nearby in more desirable areas or no?
It'd probably be easier to do a thread graft as opposed to a regular graft on this, but you could. I mean, the tree doesn't have any branches on this side. It's kind of, you can see it. It could definitely use a branch over on this side. Don't know whether it will ever get one. I have some very large trees that sometimes they just sprout out all over the place.
Yeah.
But on this is an old tree, and it's not probably very likely that it's going to bud out anything on this side here. So you could probably grow something out real long and thread graft it through. Would probably be the best thing to do. But as far as this being in the crotch, I mean in the concave part of the tree, that is done. I mean, it's not a desirable thing, but it's really not that undesirable either. I mean, sometimes the tree you don't have any choice. You need a branch there if it comes out on that side of the tree. In that position, that's okay. These two are pretty close together. They're almost on the same plane, so it'd be better if it didn't. I mean, these three are all real close. So the front of the tree, you're probably looking at the front here. So this is kind of a back branch. I would probably leave this branch and kind of wire it over this way. This one I might use as a sacrifice, let this grow out and then bring it back and bring a branch out in here. Another one could come up, bring another branch out in here. As long as you have live wood, I mean, you can actually, you can put a thread graft through dead wood and come out on the live side over here, and that's acceptable. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be alive on both sides when you do a thread graft. It just has to be alive on the side where it's coming out, not where it's going in. Okay? A thread graft, in case you don't know what a thread graft is, you drill a hole through the trunk and with your appropriate size drill to whatever size the branch is that you're going to put through, and you thread it through, you wire it in place so it stays there, and then let it grow wild for a couple of years so that it heals up. You just make sure that the callus on the outside growing part is really showing signs of growth, because it'll callus up on this side sometimes more so than on this side, and you want to make sure that it's this side that's calloused, because once you cut this off on this side and it's not attached over here, it's not going to take. That means you failed, because it'll get fatter on this side first, because that's where it's coming in. So, and usually when you do a thread graft, you keep everything off the branch on this side and let anything coming out on this side just grow wild, because this is the side you want to grow. Any other questions? Neil?
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about keeping short inner nodes on refined trees, and specifically if you hold off on giving it nitrogen in the spring, and how long?
Okay. This tree I won't feed until the leaves harden off. I mean, once the leaves get fully developed and everything, then I'll give it some fertilizer. But at this stage, it's been dormant the whole year, it was fed well all last year, so it's got plenty of energy to nourish the leaves and keep them going. If you give this fertilizer now, all it's going to do is make the leaves get a more rapid growth, which they grow fast enough as it is, and bigger leaves. So I do not fertilize this time of year on these trees. I just let them do their own thing, and then once the leaves harden off and they reach their full size, then I might fertilize.
Likewise, this one too, Neil. I would hold off on fertilizer. If you give it too much nitrogen, it's just going to really get away from you. So a little bit of diet, I think. Any questions?
Somebody else back.
As far as, oh, sorry.
it preferable, or is there any difference between using your red branch on a lower branch or on top of the tree?
I'm sorry, get it a little louder?
Oh, yeah, so is it better to use a lower branch for your thread or an upper branch for your thread?
It doesn't matter. But doesn't, what the question was, is it desirable to use an upper branch for a thread graft or a lower branch to a thread graft? Wherever you can get a branch to grow long enough to do that with. So, you know, if something up here grows faster than it does down here, then use that one. If it's the one that comes out down here, let it grow. You know, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have any effect on whether the thread graft takes or not.
Timing for repotting deciduous trees?
I think just as buds are swelling on trees is about the best time to do it. I've heard that if doing it too early, it will work, but the tree is not as strong. So I'm waiting. Right about now is pretty good for this elm tree because it's starting to pop some buds. They're getting fat and green here. And that's what I would wait for. A little bit of that.
You mentioned that you could take a leaf and cut the leaf in half. Could you talk about that just a little bit more?
Sure. Some of the trees don't like to be totally defoliated. Japanese maples, for instance, in my experience. So the largest leaves that are growing inside, I would cut in half to slow them down. And there is always a bud at the base of these leaves, you see. And so when that leaf is used up, that bud will pop out.
So you're cutting it in half.
I'll show you.
You're not cutting it down the middle to get glue.
No. I'll show you. I do it on the internal part. And then the bud back underneath here should come out eventually. But I will not take all of the leaves off like this. Whereas on a maple, you used to see John Maka would defoliate his elms by doing this. But I was reading recently that it's a really good idea if you can leave a little bit of the petiole just for strength back to it. But John would disagree and say, go ahead.
You know, my elms, you know, fortunately for me, my elm trees, I don't have any elm trees that have leaves that big. So most of my elm trees have really tiny leaves on them. So I don't defoliate my elms because if I did, I wouldn't be able to see the leaves on a couple of them. So I don't do that. But you know, I do have an Iliagnus or a silverberry, and very healthy tree, and I defoliated it completely last year, and no adverse effect. I didn't know you could do that, but somebody had told me that you could, so I tried it last year, and it worked very well. I had the tree, you know, just put out a whole bunch of new leaves, and they were all a lot smaller, and that's what you want. That's besides getting the ramification, the second set of leaves is always smaller. And that's what a lot of people, once their trees reach maturity, like this tree here, I mean, it's got pretty good ramification, but, and the leaves are pretty small on this also. They're not, they're smaller than any of these leaves up here. Maybe, I may get some this size on it, but not very many. You know, I mean, mostly they're smaller than this. So, but on this tree, if I see a large leaf, I just cut it off. You know, and that's true with any tree. I don't care what it is, whether it's an evergreen or a deciduous tree or whatever. If you see large leaves on them and they're out of proportion with the other leaves on the tree, I just cut them off. I mean, the tree's not going to miss them, and it's going to produce a new leaf that's going to come out. So it's not really detrimental to the health of the tree or anything.
Yeah, so this tree, I'm just looking for health, that's all. I want it to grow. So all of these are going to grow out until this summer, then I'll cut them back, keep pushing back, let them grow, push back, let them grow. And that gives you a little bit more size in the trunk. And if you follow the proportion to triangulation of the, then the branches up on the top aren't going to be as thick as the ones down on the bottom, and therefore the trunk is not going to be as thick up on the top as it is down the bottom. That's what we want to develop, is that proportion between branches and trunk. Lynn?
I have a question about color. Liquid ambers in the fall, some of them get spectacularly red. I was defoliating and realized this year I didn't defoliate one of them, and I got this really very late, way after I showed, red tree. I don't know how to, whether it's weather, something we're feeding our trees, how do we encourage some of that fall color in the maples and the liquid ambers?
I don't know. It depends a lot on our weather, climate. I really don't know. And all I've ever tried with the liquid ambers is just to get the ramification by taking the leaves off, but leaving them on and coloring them, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, maybe at a cold snap or something. Yeah, John?
One year, Ernie Coe put a Eliadnus in the Winter Silhouette show, Deciduous, showing berries hanging down from the twigs. No foliage whatsoever, but it was a established bonsai, well ramified. You're interested in growing this, shaping the tree at a younger stage, so that's why you're more comfortable leaving the leaves on.
Correct.
In his case, he had a show tree that was showable, well ramified, real thick trunk. I thought I was seeing things because it was an Eliadnus fruit hanging from the twigs.
Yeah.
No leaves.
Pretty. That's a great winter silhouette when you have the fruit hanging down off the defoliated branch.
The fruit, for those of you who don't know, the fruit on an Eliadnus is really not very significant. They're pretty small. They're really just like a little bell-shaped upside down. They hang down, and so they're not very significant. So if that's all you saw on the tree, it would be a pretty spectacular tree.
I have a question.
Any other questions? Yes.
Do ginkgos like to be defoliated?
Oh yeah, definitely. Any deciduous tree. I don't know of any deciduous tree that you can't defoliate. I mean, I do not know of one.
Beech.
Well, beech doesn't do bonsai either, so you don't. How many times do you see a beech bonsai?
Here, yeah.
They just don't.
If you had one.
I mean, they don't like their roots messed with or anything else, so
Birch and beech.
they just don't do well here. So, other questions? Yes.
How about root pruning?
Root pruning.
Very important for the top to balance. Yes.
When you repot this time of year, when you repot, I mean, this tree could be repotted right now, and you could root prune it pretty significantly. I mean, root pruning on a deciduous tree can be very, very aggressive, especially if you've got a tree that if you have a tree that's in a nursery container at this time of year, you can be very, very aggressive with it. But the key thing is to spread your roots out in a shallower container, but bigger around, so that you've still got a lot of soil in there, and you've got room for the roots to grow, but it's in a shallower container than a nursery container. So that way, once you decide to put it in a pot, or you find a pot that fits the tree, then you'll have a shallower root base. But you can really be aggressive with root pruning on deciduous trees. I mean, I don't think I've ever lost a deciduous tree because I root pruned it too much, and I've been pretty aggressive. I've grown a lot of trees in the ground over the years, and they were always growing on something, though. They were never just growing wildly in the ground. I always had them on a paver or something like that, so that the roots were kind of in a flat thing already. So I didn't have a big problem with the depth of the root base.
Good point.
Other questions? Yes.
If you're air layering or root, encouraging roots at the base to grow, would you withhold any pruning? Would you be careful about pruning?
Well, here again, when if you transplant, you can do a little bit of trimming at that time, but theoretically, most of your pruning should have already been done. Or if your tree is being transplanted, I don't think it really matters that much. I don't think I'd want to make any large cuts on something that was just freshly transplanted, because it wouldn't have the energy to start that healing process as well as if the tree was a year later to cut those larger branches off. As far as air layering, I would not do an air layer on a tree that was just transplanted. I mean, your tree is lacking in vigor and everything else, so I would wait. I wouldn't root prune. I wouldn't do an air layer on this tree if I was going to I wouldn't root prune it if I was going to air layer it. Okay?
So no big procedure, but you could do
Yeah.
lower level, small amounts of pruning,
Yes.
shaping, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
One more important point, keep your trees alive.
Yeah, I mean, bonsai, and like I've always, and like John Naka always taught both of us, because we both took lessons from John, if your tree is in the proper soil, you can have anybody water your trees. As long as they put water on the tree every day, they can't overwater it and they can't underwater it if it's in the proper soil. So that's very, very important, is a proper soil. And I use the same soil on all of my trees except my pine. It's the only tree that gets different soil. Everything else gets the same exact soil. Any other questions? We don't want to really get into soil.
That's another lecture.
No more questions? Okay. I think we're done.